So I'd like to welcome you to the Unmasked Relationship Factor, where we're going to be looking at some of the unseen and hidden dynamics and overlooked dynamics that take place within relationships, but also being intentional about creating real resolve as it relates to thriving relationships. So I am the AliNICOLE WOW, also known as Majesty, and some of you know me from my Majesty-preneur role. And before we get started, I just want to share that I am certified in relationship psychology and also relationship counseling as well. And I do have a background in psychology and also Christian counseling. So it was important for me to come forth and do this series. It's been something that I've been really prompted to do for quite some time. I have several platforms that deal with the love dynamics, primarily for the self-love. And also I have several publications on Amazon that relate to the love factor. And so I wanted to come forth to do this series because there's been a number of scenarios that have taken place, especially over the last few months, that really have prompted me to be more intentional about really unmasking a lot of what typically takes place that is often not really talked about. So during this series, there's going to be some debunking of myths. There's going to be definitely getting to some real resolutions and really looking at the things that are basically covered up within relationships. People are masking a whole lot of different things. And because of this, relationships that potentially could thrive, they actually don't, because there's no real resolution. And also, I'm going to be focusing on how a lot of the theories, or I should say suggested practices, are very much outdated to where the relationship dynamics are shifting and where they're headed. We're entering into a new phase, a new world, and some of the old just does no longer serve. And you have to be really aware, of that. So something I do want to address right now in terms of relationship dynamics, and as I was mentioning, things that are uncovered or needing to be uncovered, I should say. And I'm going to be addressing a lot about the male dynamics and how a lot of times there's the myths that men are the ones who are really abusive and aggressive. And I'm just going to say that it's certainly just not true. Maybe at one point, it was more of that was taking place. But interestingly, over the last, I would say, definitely the last decade for sure, there's been a lot of shifting in women's dynamics as it relates to the breakdowns of relationships, as well, even within the abusive structures. So those will be some things that I will be discussing, as well. Also, I'm going to invite you to share in the comments some of the challenges that you've been facing within relationships, and also maybe some of the solutions that you have come across or leveraged, within relationship dynamics, because they certainly can help others. Something also I want to mention that during this series is I'm just going to be real and raw for sure. And even though I do have a background, within this field, I also have my own personal dynamics that I've had, over the years. And it's always good when we can share from a personal place and not just a professional place, or even if I'm not sharing things that have occurred with me over the years, just know I have a background in that as well, to be able to, empathize and sympathize with others. So what I want to talk about during this time as it relates to relationships and what needs to be unmasked at this point is the unmasking of the true self. A lot of times people are not operating at their highest potential, the best versions of themselves, primarily because they don't really even know themselves. And so something that I have been encouraging others throughout the years, and I have publications and courses around this, is about the immersion into self-love, all right? Immersing to really know who you are, who you were created to be, because only when you can be that best version of you, then you can give that in another relationship. But if you don't know yourself well enough, how do you think that you're going to be in a relationship and come to know that person for who they are if you don't really know yourself? Relationships are very much a mirror, very much a reflection of who we are. Now, I know some may disagree with that because they say, well, no, that person's very aggressive and they talk this way and I don't talk that way. Okay, that could be true, but let me tell you where that is a reflection, or what it is a reflection of. It is a reflection of your own lack of self-love and self-worth, because people only treat us the way that we allow. There's something in us that is projecting or attracting a certain type of behavior and dynamics out of individuals. Now, let me say this: individuals are responsible for whatever their actions are, no matter what vibrations or dynamics that you're giving out, all right? But we do have to take responsibility for what we are projecting. A lot of times when we've allowed different things within our lives, then again, we invite circumstances in that help to level us up in the area, but they are painful often in the process. Sometimes people overlook these types of dynamics because they want to say, no, this is happening because of something outside of me. This person did this. And of course, we've lived in a society that has really promoted that victimhood. So each and every person can find themselves being a victim at some point. But rarely is there the reflection on the truth of that individual, why these things are occurring. And old psychology, of course, would love for you to get to the root of it by going into your childhood and discovering why this happened, why you act and why you behave this way. So I'm going to go against the grain just a little bit, all right? And I'm not saying that some of that isn't true, but what I do know is that the power is in the present moment. And since the power is in the present moment, you are present now and circumstances are happening during this time. Yes, are some of those based on the momentum and the building up of things that have occurred? Absolutely. But here's the deal. You can't go back in the past enough to try to clear and clean something up where everything is happening in the now, and making choices from this place and choosing a different focus, a different direction to go. Now, in saying that, it certainly does mean that there are things that need to be healed. And those things that are needing to be healed, yes, have occurred at some point, but you just can't keep focusing on that. You're aware of it happening, but then shifts need to be made. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because if you continue to look elsewhere other than in the now, you're dooming yourself, all right? If you look out in society, and even people who have been to counseling and they continue to go, or they're on meds, all right? Old counseling, old psychology keeps people trying to figure out who did what happened here, what happened then, takes you out of the powerful now, or puts you too much in the future, and we need to be present. So as we're looking at relationship dynamics, your relationship with yourself, how is your relationship with you right now? So, well, my relationship with myself right now is based on what happened previously. Again, that's true. But see, there's no power in what happened previously. Can you extract a diamond from previous scenarios? Absolutely. But that extraction can only happen where? In the now. So yes, can we take elements of the past, so to speak, bring them into the present moment and leverage them for our highest and best good? Yes, but you have to be fully engaged in the present, fully engaged in the present. Because if you cut your finger yesterday, right, that's already occurred. And yes, you are dealing with the scar or the pain of something that happened, but you can only deal with that pain in the present moment. So we're aware that a scar has taken place, excuse me, some type of cut has taken place, and this is what it has produced. But again, when we are working in healing and looking at some of the unseen dynamics and just different things around relationship, we can only do it now. So that's where I want to invite you to be extremely present in this moment, even as you're listening to me. And whatever has happened has happened. What do you want now? What are you making the choice around relationships now, starting with you, because it's going to start with you. So a lot of what I'm going to be discussing again within this series is about the relationship with self, the relationship with life, and then the relationship with others, right? But ultimately, the highest priority of a relationship is going to be a relationship with your creator, with God, with Christ, however you see that for yourself. But the reason why we're going to actually start with your relationship with you is because it is hard for people to even grasp having a relationship and a connection with God when they don't actually have a relationship with themselves that can even interpret God or source, however you see that for yourself, in the most accurate ways. Because, of course, traditionally, God is seen in a more masculine, at least in the Western, philosophies, is seen in this male role. And so if people have had relationships with men that they have not been what they desired, then they can attach that vibration to a male-oriented, type of higher power. So when we start with you, even the Bible talks about, love the Lord thy God as you love, yourself. You have to love yourself a certain way, then you can love your neighbor as you love yourself. But you can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself, not authentically. And I actually have a publication around that particular topic about loving thyself. It's part of my Love Thyself series, where you have to be and then give the love you wish to receive so you can be effective in being able to do that. Authentic love cannot flow from a stream that does not have a cup full of what it is trying to give, or a river full of what it is trying to give. And so you have to be able to be that. That's the embodiment of loving thyself. And then you can authentically give that. Now, I know that can get kind of tricky too, because, sometimes, we do feel that we are giving things that we're not really receiving. And we think the best thing to do is maybe to give that in order to receive, or just say, well, this is how I would like to be treated, so I'm going to treat people the way I would like to be treated. And that's fine. And that does work to some extent, right? But in order for there to be the divine right balance exchange, or divine right value exchange, is that you do have to have some capacity of that within you in order to give it. I certainly can't give away money to someone that I don't have. Certainly, I can give vibrational currency away for sure, and best wishes and things like that. But the physical, tangible cash, or even, let's say it's on a card or so, if I don't literally have that, or even the credit to stretch that over, I can't give that. All right. So that's how you have to see this with yourself as well. You don't, some things you have, but you don't even need to be giving because you don't actually have enough to be giving as it relates to certain, situations, certain scenarios. So you have to be very mindful, be very mindful of that. So let me talk a little bit about some of the unseen dynamics within relationships. And within the series, I'll get more into breaking it down. And I'm going to tie in how this relates to the self-love factor. So, I mentioned earlier that within the traditional culture or some of these society conditionings where there's been a lot of focus on the male abuse factor, so to speak, and kind of downplays some of the abuse that women too can hurl out as well. And I'm not here to pick any sides or anything. This is really about getting real resolution, unmasking certain things. And this is just the truth. There are a lot of things that women go through that society doesn't understand as it relates to males. And then again, there are a lot of areas that men take a strong hitting in they're often misunderstood in those areas as well. So when I was talking about how men are often talked about or looked upon as being more abusive and more aggressive, and I'm saying that there are some women who definitely have been showing a lot of that. Now, why is that? Now, some can say, well, because that's the way they grew up. And some of them grew up with abusive fathers or different things. And now they're playing that out for protection. And a lot of that is true. I'm not saying, that it isn't. So some would say, well, see, that's still taking it back to, it starts with men. And I'm going to address that too, especially in a crash course that I do, in that area. But one of the reasons why I want to talk about this in terms of it needing to be unmasked, because though a lot of what is out there is true to a certain extent, or I would say has been, but there are a lot of men who are suffering and struggling and suffocating in silence due to the hand of women who are some overly aggressive, some very sneaky and silent killers, if you will. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment because I know that could have stung, some. And when I say silent, meaning breaking men down, punishing men for things that happen to them. The saying that you can attract a good thing, but doesn't necessarily mean that you can keep it or that you're really ready for it. And there are some women who attract good men, and because of what they have endured, then they begin to break those men down. Now, does it mean that those men are weak? No, not necessarily. Some men have been raised to behave a certain way. And so they don't want to step out of place to offend a woman or to raise up in, an emotional way to do something that they know society is just not going to support, them being able to act out, themselves. And so when you have women who have had certain upbringings or they've been in certain types of relationships, toxic types of relationships, abusive types of relationships, and then they decide, yes, I'm going to make sure that that doesn't happen again. But sometimes they end up becoming abusers themselves. And so this is a topic that's not often talked about. I'm not saying that it isn't talked about, but a lot of times it can be very much overlooked because it can be perceived as, well, men are stronger, so they should not retaliate against a woman if she lashes out at them a certain way. Well, okay, potentially that's true. And the reason why I say potentially, because men, in some cases, strength-wise, yes, But what about a woman who picks up an object and knocks the hell out of them with it, and and it didn't merit that, you know, or she scratches them up. She does some things, can be very damaging. And so a lot of times those things are overlooked. It's like, well, he should be able to take it, and he should be able to deal with it. And he should be tough enough in his mind that, yeah, he should be able to deal with that, or walk away. Well, definitely walk away, but it doesn't necessarily stop that female from coming back at him and then building up a pattern. So there are a lot of different things. Like I said, this particular one, and I've seen it and witnessed it. This is one of those areas that's, again, people like to kind of shy that away, but we can't get to real resolutions if we, in fact, are not looking at some things for what they are. And even with women, we have to be able to examine our own behaviors, our own psychology, and start digging in some areas that can be uncomfortable. But as I say to anyone, diamonds don't get tickled out of a coal. They don't get unearthed by tickling them. There is pressure that is applied in order for a diamond to be extracted. So in the relationship dynamics, that's why it's important to immerse into self-love, because if you don't extract from within the best of who you are, that diamond or that treasure, a lot of relationships are going to continue to suffer. And then sometimes people are suffering because they're just misinterpreting what is actually happening and why things are occurring. There's a saying that life is not happening to us, it's happening for us, and it's happening through us, right? So those are three different dynamics in the sense that people can make a conscious choice and assign to a particular scenario what they believe it to be. Now, what they believe it to be isn't always true. And that's why getting to the root, if you will, or discovering the truth, uncovering that truth, unmasking, what is really there? What is really going on? Because at the end of the day, within each and every person is the ability to be the absolute best, not just for themselves, but the best for others as well. But again, it starts with you. So that's the most important relationship. And of course, from an older paradigm, and I would subscribe to this and say, well, no, your most important relationship is with God, and then you. And we can look at them as one and the same. I remember years ago, and this has been many, many years ago, where having a conversation with God, and God said, our relationship is fine, but your relationship with you sucks. Basically, it came out like that. And I had to really examine why I allowed certain things to take place. I've actually never been one who liked to assign and put blame, and this happened in the past or different things, and not saying that certain things did not occur, but I've never really been one to really look back and just keep regurgitating or even try to blame people for things that I know that were intentional. So I have been someone who has been pretty responsible in that area. But again, just because I had been certainly didn't mean that I was still not in some way allowing myself to be devalued and not placing responsibility in the areas where was most important. What was my relationship with me? Because we teach people how to treat us, okay? And sometimes you can be nice, and yes, that niceness can be taken for granted, so to speak. But sometimes that niceness also comes out of ego, thinking that you need to be a certain way, thinking you have to perform a certain way, all the while devaluing who you are, diminishing who you are. And in some, religious settings or conditionings, I should say, is thinking you have to be this suffering saint. You You should be able to take certain things, like lie down and let people walk over you, but you'll be blessed in return. And as we can see, that has not played out very well, in a lot of cases. And so being able to even unmask things like that, sometimes it's not, people have had certain challenges in relationship dynamics within their family. Sometimes it's been within religious structures or different things that have molded to shape people to be the way that they are. But again, the power is in the present moment. And what do we know to be true about us in this moment, and what actually is right in a line that's going to play out again for people to be the best that they're supposed to be, and then be able to share that with others. If you don't have a solid relationship with yourself, you actually can't really have a solid relationship with God, not a real one, or allow that spirit to flow through you in order to be most effective. It's still going to come back to you. Even when you make a decision about life, or you make a decision about God, it's a decision that you have had to make, even though there is that force that is pursuing you to come up higher, to choose that relationship. We were chosen, right? But we too have to choose and have to make conscious decisions. And so that's why a lot of these things, going back to the unseen dynamics, some of the hidden things that are often not talked about, because we've been conditioned to, well, no, you need to focus here first. And a lot of people have focused there first. And that has not served them, because it's a misinterpretation in terms of how those dynamics are supposed to play out. So something I want to address, and then I'm going to kind of tie this up, because I'll get into more in the series where I'm going to break things down and sort of categorize a few things, because I have things I want to speak directly to men about, and some I want to speak directly, to women about. But I want to talk about the communications factor before wrapping up here. A lot that has to be unmasked and debunked even in that area. So it's been common to know that men are not the most emotional creatures, and they are not the best communicators. And I will say, I have found that in a lot of cases to be true as well, but also with women. Women sometimes are not the best communicators, because talking and sharing and expressing, though it is a form of communication, does not mean that it is the most accurately aligned communication that needs to be rendered during certain times in a relationship. Okay. And so there's a lot around that. Then there are things that women keep silent about, or they do wear a mask around certain dynamics. And a lot of those dynamics are ones that are often not talked about. And again, I'm going to get more into that, within the series. But, we'll find within the relationship dynamics that there's so much to unpack. But people really have to start unpacking themselves and unmasking, in terms of, there are some things you do need to mask up with, but there are things that really have to be unmasked. You really have to get real. And this getting real is in a very different context than even the traditional, let's get real about this. We need to get real about this. But it's interesting that even when people are getting real, there's some type of template out there that's telling you what real is supposed to look like. Real is an individualized thing. And as you're going through this series, there's going to be a lot that you have to customize, because I want you to be able to pull out of you, what is the truth for you? And then create a plan and a dynamics moving forward to enhance your life, your connection with source, with God, and then the connection with others. And then obviously, if it's the significant other, that you have to be with consistently and supposed to be as one, operating as one unit, that's where, of course, some extra work has to be, applied. You have to get into action in another way. And so I'm going to help you to uncover what that is, unmask what that is for you, versus trying to actually just give you a formula to say this is, I mean, there's enough formulas out there, all right? Here's how you do this. Yes, would there be suggestions and recommendations? Absolutely. But I want to trigger you. And when I say trigger, I mean like a journal prompting experience. Give you the prompts and a trigger mechanics to bring out of you what is going to be most relevant. What is truth for you? All right. That's what needs to be unmasked. So I'm looking forward to doing this series, with you, is to help everyone, because when we help ourselves, we help the whole of everyone. But we do have to get real in some ways that we have never really gotten real before. We have to 10x it, right? Take things to the next level, but bring it all in the now. So looking forward definitely to unmasking more within the relationship dynamic so you can discover your unique factor for moving forward during this time. So check the description below where you can learn a little bit more about me and this area, platforms that I have, and just also upcoming things that I have emerging. So stay tuned for the series, look for the playlist, and I'll be back with you soon.